You thought the desert would end me. It became my beginning.
The Arizona sun felt like fire as I stood in that cracked parking lot, staring at the empty space where our Honda had been. In that moment, I knew things would never go back. Jessica, my wife, and her friends Amy, Brooklyn, and Madison had finally done something they couldn't brush off as harmless fun. For 6 years of marriage, I'd lived under their constant ridicule. Jessica laughed at every cruel joke instead of shutting it down. They whispered behind my back, made inside comments I was never meant to understand, and mocked me at parties with accidental spills and staged pranks. They treated me like a stray they had to tolerate, but leaving me at a dusty truck stop, hours from home, stripped of my phone and wallet. That was beyond anything I could excuse. My phone and wallet were charging in the car. All I had left were the wrinkled clothes on my back, 27 forgotten dollars in my pocket, and the dawning realization that this wasn't another setup. Jessica had called this trip a bonding weekend at Amy's cabin, swearing it would help me finally connect with her friends. I should have known it was just another trap. I'd only stepped into the restroom for 5 minutes, just long enough to wash my face and brace myself for another round of their games. When I walked back out, the lot was empty. No car, no tire marks, nothing. For the first hour, I convinced myself they'd roll back in, laughing, Jessica calling, "Gotcha," like always. I kept waiting for the sound of tires on gravel, but the road stayed silent, except for passing semis whose drivers didn't even look my way. By the second hour, the heat was unbearable. Sweat soaked my shirt, and my throat burned with thirst. I replayed the trip in my head, Brooklyn smirking as she accidentally knocked my drink into the lake, Madison whispering something to Jessica that sent them both into laughter while staring straight at me, Amy's smug little smile like she was collecting notes for future ridicule. I should have noticed the warning signs. The quick glances when they thought I wasn't watching, the hush whenever I entered a room, the hidden laughter whenever I tried to join in. They had been building up to something bigger. I was too desperate for their approval to admit it. 2 hours in, a trucker named Earl spotted me pacing and pulled over. He said it wasn't unusual. People got ditched out here more often than I'd believe. His voice was rough but kind, and it hit me hard. Jessica wasn't coming back. None of them were. Earl was the kind of man who helped strangers without expecting anything. Gray beard, worn cap, truck smelling of diesel and coffee. He hummed old country tunes as we drove, while I stared out at the endless desert. I could have asked to borrow his phone, but I already knew what Jessica would say. It was just a joke. You're too sensitive. I had heard that line too many times. He dropped me at a crossroads near Flagstaff, tipped his cap, and wished me luck. I had no plan, no one to call, just 27 crumpled bills and an empty highway. Part of me wanted to beg someone to call Jessica, to crawl back, to let myself be the weak husband they'd molded me into. But another voice told me to keep moving forward. I was done being their punchline. The walk to Flagstaff took hours. My shoes tore at my feet until blisters formed, and cars sped by without slowing. Maybe I looked like just another drifter now. But with every painful step, I felt something shift. They hadn't destroyed me. Without meaning to, they'd given me my freedom. By the time the sun dropped, my feet were torn up and my back screamed. But my mind was set. I wasn't going back. Not to Jessica. Not to that house where I had spent years tiptoeing. Not to the job where I kept pretending while my marriage collapsed. In Flagstaff, I found a shelter run by a man named Pete. Bald head, sharp eyes, the look of someone who'd been through hell and fought his way out. The place smelled of bleach and stale air, crowded with men who had all hit their own dead ends. "You lost or just broke?" Pete asked, reading me like a book. "Both," I said. Something in my voice must have sounded true, because he handed me a clipboard, pointed toward a cot, and told me we'd talk tomorrow. That night was brutal. Lying on that thin mattress, surrounded by strangers coughing and snoring, I couldn't shake Jessica's face from my head. Her laugh, her voice, the way she brushed off every complaint I had. "Don't be so sensitive, Danny," she'd say, like I was a burden, like I was the joke. Maybe I never understood their brand of cruelty dressed up as humor, but in that shelter, I finally saw the truth. They never understood me either, and Jessica would always choose them over me, no matter how much it crushed me. Pete kept his word. The next morning came with bitter coffee and a plan. "First thing you need is ID," he said, laying out the forms. "Takes time, but for now, You need cash in your pocket if you want to eat. The paperwork maze was insane. Driver's license needed a social security card needed a birth certificate, and every step demanded papers I no longer had. Alone, I would have quit. But Pete knew the system, the shortcuts, the clerks who still had hearts. He guided me through the mess like he'd done it 100 times. He also sent me to Rita's Roadhouse, a greasy diner that needed help fast. Rita was tough as nails, arms covered in faded tattoos, eyes that cut straight through you. She didn't ask for a story, she just gave me a deal. My dishwasher quit yesterday, she said, tossing me an apron. Pay is minimum wage. Hours are when I say. Work is hot, wet, and thankless. Steal from me or show up drunk. You're out. Start now or walk out. Decide. I stayed. The job was hell. Burning water that peeled my hands raw, towers of filthy plates and mugs that never seemed to shrink. My back throbbed every night, and the grease stuck so deep in my clothes it never washed out. But it was mine. My job. My weight to carry. A place Jessica and her friends couldn't reach. Rita ran the diner like a drill sergeant. Orders flew from the kitchen, no room for mistakes, no time for whining. But she was fair. Work hard and she left you alone. Fail and you paid the price. Improve and you earned her respect. Slow but real. The crew was a rough mix. Waitresses who'd seen it all. A line cook with prison ink who could flip perfect eggs blindfolded. Busboys who drifted in and out without a trace. They didn't ask questions. They just accepted me. Maybe because anyone scrubbing dishes for scraps must already have a story too heavy to share. Weeks slid into months like clockwork. I tucked away every spare dollar in a small envelope under my shelter cot, worked with Pete to replace all my ID, and little by little started piecing together something like a normal life. Washing dishes gave me time to think about what had happened, about who I wanted to be now that I was free from Jessica's grip. The turning point came when I saved enough for rent on a cramped studio above Luigi's laundromat. The place was barely bigger than a closet, just one room with a fold-out bed, a hot plate, a tiny bathroom, and windows facing dumpsters. But the key in my pocket meant more than any house I'd shared with Jessica. It meant freedom. No more crowded cots, no more strangers' snores, no more rules about when to sleep or wake. I had a door I could lock, 4 walls that were mine alone, silence when I needed to think or just breathe. Rita noticed the change right away. You look less like death warmed over, she said, then gave me more duties, prepping food, taking stock, training dishwashers who quit after a shift or two. More hours meant more cash, and more cash meant options I'd never had while married. My body toughened from the grind. Hands calloused, arms hardened from hauling crates and sacks of potatoes. I learned to work fast in tight spaces, to juggle tasks under pressure, to fix problems without falling apart. I didn't know it yet, but those skills would carry me far past the kitchen. My first big test of independence came when I bought a prepaid flip phone. Holding it in that store, I felt a pride Jessica could never understand. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine, paid for with sweat and long hours. Then the calls started. 2 days later, during the lunch rush, the phone buzzed in my pocket. Jessica's number. My stomach knotted. I let it ring out, scrubbing plates with shaking hands. Later, her voicemail played, her voice soft, shaky, rehearsed. Danny, where are you? We came back and waited for hours. It was just a silly joke. We're worried. Please call. I stood in my tiny kitchen, staring at the phone. Worried? They'd left me stranded, probably laughing for hours before anyone thought about circling back. If they had cared, they would have found me pacing that lot like an animal in a cage. Minutes later, another buzz. This time, Amy, sounding smug. Come on, man. You gotta admit it was hilarious seeing your face. Call us, okay? Jessica's being dramatic. Hilarious. That word told me everything. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a joke, the punchline to share over drinks. The messages poured in over the next few days. Jessica again, sounding more desperate. Madison with a shaky, sorry, that felt scripted. Brooklyn tossing in guilt trips. Texts piled up. We miss you. This isn't funny anymore. Your grandmother called about you. Each night I sat on my narrow bed, scrolling through them with a tight chest and spinning head. Jessica's voice in my ear, dripping with fake concern, trying to twist guilt back onto me. They didn't miss me. They missed their target. The mention of Grandma Rose cut deep. She was the only one who'd ever shown me real care. Birthday cards, gentle questions, kindness. Jessica using her name was nothing but bait, another hook to reel me back. That night, I sat in the dark with the phone glowing in my hands, their words stacking up on the screen like a wall of mind games. I replayed Jessica's practiced voicemail, Amy's mocking laugh, Madison's half-hearted blame shift. My thumb hovered over the call button, years of habit almost pulling me into the same trap. Part of me wanted to call back, to yell, to demand answers. But what would that change? Jessica would laugh or cry her fake tears, and I'd end up the villain again. That cycle had spun for 6 years. Hurt, complain, get dismissed, then apologize for being upset. Not this time, not anymore. I went through my contacts list methodically. Jessica, Amy, Brooklyn, Madison, and blocked every single number with deliberate finality. My finger trembled slightly as I confirmed each deletion, but once it was done, the phone went blessedly silent. No more buzzing notifications, no more emotional manipulation disguised as concern, no more lies wrapped in fake sweetness. Work became my meditation and salvation. Rita noticed my improved focus and energy almost immediately. "You seem different lately," she observed while counting the day's receipts. "Less distracted. Whatever was eating at you looks like you're handling it." I just nodded and kept wiping down counters, not wanting to explain the complicated relief of cutting toxic people out of your life. The diner's rhythm became comforting. Morning coffee rush, lunch crowd chaos, quiet afternoon hours, dinner rush, then peaceful cleanup time when I could think without interruption. Rita started trusting me with more responsibilities, ordering supplies, training new hires who usually quit within a week, handling difficult customers who thought yelling would improve their service. Months accumulated like layers of sedimentary rock, each day building on the previous one until I had something resembling a stable foundation again. I saved enough money to upgrade from that cramped studio to a one-bedroom apartment with an actual kitchen and living room. Nothing fancy, but it had windows that let in real sunlight and space to think without feeling claustrophobic. The healing process wasn't linear or simple. Some nights I'd lie awake replaying conversations with Jessica, analyzing every cruel comment or dismissive gesture, trying to understand how I'd tolerated it for so long. Other nights I'd feel genuinely grateful for what had happened, recognizing that getting abandoned was probably the only thing traumatic enough to break me out of that psychological prison. Then Luna walked into my life and changed everything again. She started coming to Rita's twice a week, always claiming the same booth by the window, always carrying a stack of medical textbooks that made the table sag under their weight. Luna ordered the same thing every visit: veggie omelet with no tomatoes, extra coffee, wheat toast on the side. She was clearly a medical student based on the terminology she'd mutter under her breath while scribbling notes in margins. What fascinated me was her complete focus. Luna would get so absorbed in studying that she'd forget basic things like eating the food she'd ordered. I'd watch her fork hover halfway to her mouth for minutes at a time while she puzzled over some diagram or memorized anatomical terms. It was endearing in a way that Jessica's constant need for attention had never been. I started switching my name tag daily just to see if this focused student would notice. Bob one day, Steve the next, Carl after that. She didn't catch on initially, too buried in textbooks about cardiovascular systems and neurological disorders. But one morning, I pinned Rusty to my shirt and walked over to refill her coffee. She looked up for the first time in weeks, eyes narrowing as they flicked from the name tag to my face and back again. "Your name tag is wrong," she said quietly but firmly, like she was diagnosing a medical condition. I grinned, genuinely caught off guard by her directness. "Is it?" My real name was Danny, though she'd never actually asked. She smirked just slightly, the first real emotion I'd seen from her, and returned to her notes. That tiny interaction stuck with me for days, replaying in my head during dishwashing marathons and late-night apartment cleaning sessions. Our first real conversation happened several weeks later when Luna showed up looking completely frazzled. Her usually neat hair was messy, dark circles under her eyes, textbooks heavier than normal like she was carrying her entire academic career in one bag. "Rough night?" I asked while setting down her regular coffee order. She sighed deeply, rubbing her face with both hands. "Midterm exams. I haven't actually slept in 3 days, just power naps between study sessions and way too much caffeine." Without thinking, I slipped an extra hash brown onto her plate when she wasn't looking. She noticed immediately, glancing up at me with surprise. "You're sneaky," she observed, but there was gratitude in her voice. I shrugged casually. "Medical students need proper nutrition to save lives someday. Gotta keep you functional." That earned me a genuine smile, the first one I'd seen from her, and something warm spread through my chest. Not romantic attraction exactly, but recognition of basic human kindness that I'd forgotten existed after years with Jessica and her psychological warfare specialists. Months passed with this comfortable routine. Luna studying intensely twice a week, me ensuring her coffee stayed full and her food stayed warm, brief conversations that never felt forced or manipulative. She wasn't performing or trying to impress anyone, just working incredibly hard toward goals that mattered to her personally. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday evening when Luna arrived at closing time looking defeated. "My study group canceled our dinner plans," she said, gesturing toward the empty restaurant. "Had reservations at some Italian place across town, but apparently everyone has better things to do than review cardiology together." I was wiping down tables, my shift technically over, when she looked directly at me. "You wouldn't want to help me not waste a perfectly good dinner reservation, would you?" Rita, who had been eavesdropping from behind the counter, practically pushed me toward the door. "Go on, kid, you've been moping around here long enough. Have some fun for once." That first date wasn't really a date at all, just two people sharing pizza and conversation without any hidden agendas or social manipulation. Luna talked about the stress of medical school, the pressure to succeed, her fears about making mistakes that could hurt people. I told her about working at the diner, Rita's tough love management style, the satisfaction of earning something through honest work. We talked until the restaurant started stacking chairs on tables around us. Easy conversation that flowed naturally without the careful navigation I'd grown accustomed to with Jessica. Luna laughed, really laughed, when I told her about the name tag experiments, saying she'd known something was off, but hadn't wanted to embarrass me by pointing it out. "I knew you weren't really named Rusty," she said, eyes bright with genuine amusement. "You don't look nearly old enough for that kind of name." 6 months later, Luna moved into my one-bedroom apartment. It was cramped with her medical textbooks taking up every available surface, but I didn't mind the chaos. She'd study late into the night, her desk lamp glowing while I tried to sleep, and I'd wake up to her muttering anatomical terms in her dreams. Somehow, it was comforting rather than annoying, the sound of someone working towards something meaningful. A year after that, we found a proper 2-bedroom place with enough space for both our stuff and actual furniture that didn't come from thrift stores. Luna was different from Jessica in every way that mattered. She didn't mock my work or make me feel small for not having a college degree. When I expressed doubt about myself or my future, she'd simply say, "You've got this," like she genuinely believed it. We developed routines that felt healthy rather than suffocating. Cooking dinner together, arguing good-naturedly about whose turn it was to do dishes, watching old movies on our secondhand couch, falling asleep tangled together like we belonged in the same space. Simple domestic happiness that Jessica had made seem impossible through her constant need for drama and conflict. Meanwhile, Jessica's desperate attempts at contact continued sporadically through different channels. Emails started appearing in my inbox. She'd somehow tracked down my address, probably through old utility bills or credit reports. The messages followed familiar patterns of manipulation disguised as concern. "Danny, I just want to know you're okay. I miss you so much. We all do." The fake sweetness was nauseating after experiencing genuine care from Luna. More emails followed, some short and guilt-trippy, others longer and more manipulative. "I know I messed up. Please just talk to me. Your grandmother asks about you every time I see her." I'd read them occasionally, feeling that familiar ache in my chest where Jessica used to live, then delete them without responding. What could she possibly say that would change anything? "It was just a prank, babe. Don't be so sensitive." I'd heard every variation of that excuse over 6 years of marriage. Luna caught me frowning at my laptop once, noticed the deleted email in my trash folder. "Who keeps messaging you?" she asked, without pushiness or jealousy, just genuine concern. "Nobody important," I replied, and she didn't push for details. That's who Luna was, secure enough in our relationship not to manufacture drama where none existed, confident enough in herself not to need constant reassurance or validation. Life rolled forward with surprising stability. Rita, who'd watched me transform from broken dishwasher to reliable employee, made an offer that changed everything again. "You know what you're doing around here," she said one morning while reviewing supplier invoices. "Better than most people I've hired over the years. I'm thinking about opening a second location across town. Smaller place, but it needs someone to run day-to-day operations." I froze mid-motion, coffee pot suspended in air. "You want me to manage a restaurant?" Rita snorted with amusement. "Do I look like someone who makes jokes about business decisions?" You're already handling half the management tasks here when I'm not around. Just make it official. Say yes or no. The imposter syndrome hit hard that night. Me? Running a restaurant? I'd gone from washing dishes to this opportunity in less than 2 years, but part of me still felt like the guy Jessica had trained to doubt every decision. Luna listened to my concerns while we ate takeout Chinese food on our couch. You're already managing that place half the time, she pointed out pragmatically. Rita wouldn't offer if she didn't trust you completely. This is just making official what you're already doing. Her confidence in my abilities meant more than she probably realized. Jessica had spent years undermining my self-worth, making me question every instinct and decision. Having someone believe in my competence felt revolutionary. I accepted Rita's offer and threw myself into learning restaurant management from the ground up. Inventory control, staff scheduling, supplier negotiations, customer service crisis management, health department regulations, all the unglamorous details that keep small businesses running. The work was challenging, but satisfying in ways I'd never experienced while married to Jessica. Years accumulated with increasing momentum. Luna graduated medical school and started her residency at the local hospital. I opened a second Rita's location, then a third when the first expansion proved successful. We bought a small house with an actual yard, got married in a simple ceremony with just close friends, started talking about having kids someday. The man who'd been abandoned at that Arizona gas station felt like someone from a different lifetime. I'd built something real and lasting, surrounded myself with people who valued me for who I actually was rather than who they wanted me to be. Jessica's psychological poison had been thoroughly flushed from my system, replaced with genuine self-respect and healthy relationships. Then, 15 years after that truck stop confrontation, Jessica found me on LinkedIn, and everything got complicated again. I was in my third restaurant's kitchen, prepping vegetables for the dinner rush, when my phone buzzed with notifications. Someone had viewed my professional profile 31 times in a single day. When I checked the analytics, there she was. Jessica, older now with a corporate headshot and shorter hair, systematically stalking my online presence like some kind of digital detective. My hands started shaking slightly as the implications sank in. 31 views meant obsessive research, not casual curiosity. She'd probably seen the restaurant locations, maybe found photos of Luna and our 2 kids, constructed a complete picture of the life I'd built without her involvement or permission. I didn't respond or view her profile back, but 3 days later, they walked into my original diner like ghosts materializing from a nightmare I thought I'd left behind. Jessica, Amy, and Madison, older, worn down by whatever failures had brought them to this desperate point. But still recognizably the same people who'd tormented me for years. I saw them before they spotted me, watched them select a window booth with the casual entitlement of people who'd never learned consequences for their actions. Brooklyn was notably absent, probably smart enough to avoid this particular catastrophe. I could have stayed in the kitchen, let my waitress handle whatever they wanted, pretended I hadn't seen them. Instead, something pulled me out there. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the need to face this ghost properly. Maybe just the confidence that comes from 15 years of building something they couldn't touch or destroy. I grabbed a coffee pot for something to hold and walked over to their table with steady steps. Jessica's face went white when she recognized me. "Oh my God, Danny, it's really you." Her voice cracked slightly, like she hadn't quite believed I was real until this moment. Amy leaned back with that familiar smirk, though it looked forced now. "Look at you, big shot. 3 restaurants, huh?" Madison fidgeted with the menu, avoiding eye contact like she had something to be ashamed of. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my voice level and professional. Jessica leaned forward desperately, fingers twisting together. "Danny, please, can we just talk? I know this is awkward, but we really need your help." The story spilled out in pathetic chunks. Jessica's boutique clothing business had collapsed spectacularly, taking her savings and second marriage with it. Amy's consulting company had folded after some unspecified scandal. Madison was going through an expensive divorce. They were all broke, desperate, and apparently thought their former sufferer owed them salvation. "You're doing really well," Amy said with forced casualness, gesturing around the busy diner. 3 successful restaurants. We just need a loan to get back on our feet. Nothing major, just enough to cover rent and expenses while we figure things out. I listened to every manipulative word, watching them squirm in that booth, like the desperate creatures they'd become. They'd driven hundreds of miles to find me, stalked my social media, tracked down my business, All because they thought I'd roll over and play sufferer again. The same guy who'd let them misuse him for years, who'd never stood up for himself, who'd been trained to apologize for their cruelty. "Wait here," I said simply, then turned and walked to my office. The tiny space felt different now. Not cramped, but focused. I sat behind the desk I'd earned through 15 years of honest work, surrounded by invoices and inventory reports and employee schedules that proved I'd built something real. They wanted money from me. After abandoning me with nothing, laughing about it, probably telling the story at parties for years, they thought I'd just hand over cash like some kind of personal ATM. I opened my desk drawer, pulled out the business checkbook, and wrote carefully. Not the amount they expected or wanted, but exactly what they deserved. When I returned to their table, Jessica's face lit up with desperate hope. She snatched the envelope eagerly, probably calculating how much she thought I owed her for years of marriage. Her expression crashed when she opened it and saw the amount. $87.50, the exact cost of a Greyhound bus ticket from Flagstaff to Phoenix, 15 years too late. "What the hell is this supposed to mean?" Amy snapped, grabbing the check like it might transform into something more substantial. I leaned closer, voice quiet, but carrying clearly through the sudden silence that had fallen over nearby tables. "That's exactly what it would have cost me to buy a bus ticket home the day you abandoned me. I didn't spend it then because I chose to walk away instead. You don't get more than that from me now." Jessica's mouth opened and closed without sound, probably running through various manipulation tactics she'd used successfully in the past. Madison flinched like I'd slapped her, finally understanding that consequences had arrived 15 years late. "After everything we meant to each other?" Jessica whispered, trying one last time to push emotional buttons that no longer existed. "After everything?" I straightened up, addressing all three of them clearly. "You drove away and left me stranded with nothing. You thought it was hilarious. This is me being more generous than you deserve." I turned toward the counter, signaling the conversation was over. "Time to leave. Don't come back to any of my restaurants." The diner had gone quiet, other customers pretending not to listen while obviously fascinated by the drama unfolding. My waitress hovered uncertainly, unsure whether to intervene or call police. I walked to the register, began organizing receipts with steady hands, letting them process what had just happened. They sat frozen for maybe 30 seconds before scrambling to collect their dignity and leave. Jessica stuffed the check into her purse. Amy muttered something under her breath that probably wasn't complimentary. Madison trailed behind like she wanted to apologize but couldn't find the words. Through the window, I watched them argue in the parking lot. Amy gesturing wildly, probably blaming Jessica for the whole fiasco. Jessica staring at the ground, maybe finally understanding that actions have permanent consequences. Madison, looking like she wanted to disappear entirely. They'd driven all this way expecting charity from their former sufferer. Some grand reconciliation where I'd forgive everything and write them a substantial check. Instead, they got exactly what they'd given me. Just enough to get home. Nothing more. I finished my shift with unusual lightness in my chest, locked up the diner, drove home to Luna and our kids. Our daughter was practicing piano in the living room, hitting more wrong notes than right ones, but improving gradually. Our son was building elaborate structures with wooden blocks, tongue poking out in concentration. Luna looked up from grading medical resident evaluations when I walked in. "How was work today?" she asked with the same genuine interest she'd shown for 15 years. "Perfect," I said, and meant every word. They'd tried to break me at that gas station, abandoned me with nothing but clothes and $27. Instead, they'd accidentally given me the greatest gift possible, freedom from their toxic manipulation, space to become who I was supposed to be, motivation to build something they could never touch or destroy. The best revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was this life I'd constructed from nothing. Successful business, loving marriage, beautiful children, self-respect that nobody could take away. They'd wanted me broken and dependent, forever grateful for whatever scraps of attention they threw my way. Instead, I'd become someone who could look them in the eye and give them exactly what they deserved. Nothing more than bus fare home. The same choice I'd made 15 years ago when I decided to walk away rather than crawl back to their psychological prison. That $87.50 was the last thing I'd ever give them. The exact cost of the ticket I never bought, because choosing my own path had been worth infinitely more than the price of going back to people who saw me as entertainment, rather than human being, deserving basic respect.